Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's webinar. I am your host, Dr. Jed Applerouth, and been working to put together a new deck. Got some new ideas I wanted to share. Some of them, this comes from decades of working with young people, and I hope you'll find it interesting. One thing I always do, I'm always very happy to share the material. So within a couple days, we're going to send you a copy of the deck. That'll be forthcoming. Additionally, we're going to send you a link to the presentation. So if you want to watch it again, share it with a spouse, share it with a friend, that'll be available. Okay. And give me a moment here. Okay. So we have this transcription. If you don't like it, there's a way to deactivate that. But there's something that we've been doing for some people for more access and so forth. Okay. So there's the chat. Let's take a minute and we're going to share a poll. This will take all of 30 seconds. So go ahead, Albert, and share the poll. So first, tell us who you are, a student, a parent, educator, click that box. Then are you in college? You have high school senior, junior, sophomore, freshman, middle school student, elementary students. Then some of our attendees need some help, either with test prep or academic tutoring or EF coaching. And then finally, do you want someone to reach out? And then that's it. Close the panel. I'll take all of a minute. And now we're going to go forward. And we're going to have time tonight for some reflection at the end and some questions and answers. But I think there's good material in the deck. So hopefully you'll learn from that. My goal is always that everyone takes at least one idea. And I'm going to give you like 20 or 30. And so hopefully something there sticks and you'll be able to bring home, and that'll be a worthwhile hour of your time. All right, rock and roll. So our topic tonight is teenagers and friends, how to build your students' social and emotional skills. This is part of our ongoing series and our teenagers' mental health and well-being. We had a talk, I believe it was last week, about teens and technology. I'm referencing that a little bit. I have, I think, 4 slides I pulled just as a refresher, because definitely social emotional learning and technology, these are connected at a very intimate level. And there's going to be a talk coming up later in August. One of my favorite topics is how to work with anxiety. And that's something that I'm sure many of you have some kids who have some anxiety. Some of you may have some anxiety. And there are different techniques, things that we can do to help, having a nice grab bag of modalities and interventions. I like offering 20 things, and then everyone finds 1 or 2, because I personally also do things to manage my own anxiety. And in my family, there's anxiety. And so I tend to be immersed in this, and as many of us are. So it seems to be a very American thing. But right now, there's much more than anxiety. This is about the whole friendship, relationships with your parents, with your teens, with their friends at work, at school. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Okay. Now, first and foremost, we have an hour tonight, and we'll be taking a little stab at a little piece of this. But social and emotional learning is a lifelong process. It's developmental. My little daughter, she's 2. She's developing socially and emotionally. Your teenagers at 16, 17, 18, they're developing, as are your young adults in their 20s and in your 30s and 40s. We're always growing and developing socially. We are social animals. So this is just one little tiny sliver of a piece here. And our end goal, our ultimate goal with our work with our kids, is we want to create an adult who can navigate the world. That's I tell parents this. I've been working with students for now in my academic contest about 21 years. And before that, I was working with kids in summer camp and tutoring for, since I was like 15 years old, so over 30 years. And our end goal, our product, is someone who can manage themselves, manage conflict, go through the world. And I see everything as practice. High school is practice, college is practice. Everything is an opportunity for learning. There's no, making a mistake in high school. We do it. I've seen many kids I work with making errors in college. I've seen kids drop out of college, come back to college. It's all part of this process. And there's not one thing where, oh, now you're off. Like, no, we're always learning, we're growing, we're evolving. There are 5 components from the collaborative of academic, social, and emotional learning. They say there are 5 parts of SEL. Self-awareness, knowing thyself, knowing how you work, metacognition, understanding what makes you function. Self-management, that's the ability to inhibit impulses, impulse control. Can I regulate myself? Can I work when I want to work? Can I inhibit distraction, all these things. Social awareness, that's something my daughter is working on, where you're looking around, you can read the room, you understand what's going on with other people, how do I affect other people, how do they affect me, how do we relate, which is a big part of teenage friendship. And then relationship skills, which essential, building friendships, it's key. One of my best friends is trying to get married and talking about people who have these and don't have these. Some people, even in their 30s and 40s, they ghost, they show up, they don't want to conflict. Some folks can have conflict, which, as you know, if those of you who are out there with kids and are married or with people, like these are, how do we do conflict? How do we manage scarce resources? You want to go here, I want to go here. How do we square that? Which is part of life. Then responsible choices, making good decisions. And that's all throughout the spectrum of, good choices with the food we put in our bodies, the drugs we take or don't take, how we spend our money, which we have or don't have, all of these things, how fast we drive our cars when it's raining or when it's dry. These are all things we're constantly making choices that affect us and affect our lives. So teenagers, they're just part of this, but also we're grappling with these same 5 when we're 30, when we're 40, when we're 50. These are all part of life. Though the teenage brain is still developing, and there are certain aspects of it that are more risk-taking, more pleasure-seeking, that we do tamp down some as we get into our 40s and 50s. But ultimately, we do know that social emotional learning and academic learning and achievement are linked intrinsically, intimately. You often see there's this new, framing of what's going on with kids' development. We have social emotional learning, we have executive functioning, and then we have academic achievement and development. These are all connected intimately. They feed each other. If your EF skills are low, that's going to affect your performance academically. If you're having a problem socially, you'll struggle academically, because part of it is learning. There's a researcher, Lev Vygotsky, talked about learning is always social. That it's a context from the child and the parent at the earliest age to being in a school. Although now he was around a long time ago before there was the internet, though he had books back then. And a lot of learning is in the context of other people. And so the quality of our relationships with self and with others informs how we learn. And kids who tend to struggle with these skills tend to also struggle academically. And often they're the ones who drop out of school. They can't manage conflict. They can't, manage themselves and so forth. And we have research. There's a group, the Aspen Institute, doing actual evidence-based research. And kids who are better at this have better attendance, the higher GPA, higher test scores, higher rates of graduation. They do better in college and in their careers. So this is real stuff. And the nice thing is these are skills. So if your kid at 16 or 17 is lacking in certain skills, grappling with things, maybe they have a tendency, maybe they're, having a hard time with friends, or things are falling out, or they're not being honest, you can work on all of this. And as you get better, this generalizes out for a long time. And we also have evidence-based, findings that high SEL development tends to go with academic and career success, better health and better well-being. If you can manage yourself, obviously health comes from that. Minimizing problems with drugs and alcohol. Kids who have challenges with social emotional learning, they're often going towards drugs that might hurt them. Alcohol, if they can't manage their feelings, their emotions, they're looking for other ways to numb it out. I was learning recently how much stronger today's pot is than it was 20, 30 years ago. And things that were somewhat benign are now even are less benign in today's time. So learning about these things, and also minimizing issues about violence and bullying. If you can manage yourself, cool yourself down, you may not go and fight with that person over in the bar. You don't know what he's carrying or packing or how he likes to fight. And so can I manage myself versus getting into a big conflict? So, these skills, again, they show up in high school, college, work, beyond everything else. Now, these skills can be taught, and I believe they should be taught, both in the classroom, driving with your kids to and from an activity, having dinner with your kids at home, on the playing field, playing sports, at summer camp. The opportunities to grow with your social and emotional development are endless. It's one moment after another that we can actually work on these skills. And so it's important to think about this. I was talking to one of my colleagues who's early 50s, and asking about her thoughts on this topic, and she has kids who are now college age, and how different things are. That when we had back, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, you wanted to be social, you have to go and find a friend, go outside, go to the pool, get in your bike. To be social these days, kids can stay in their room. It's different in terms of how they learn, how they conflict, how they fight with each other, how they make up, how they date. We used to have more negotiations. I remember if you want to use a phone, we had one phone. There was no cell phone. And if someone's hogging the phone, hey, Mitch, get off the phone. I have to call someone. So that was a negotiation. Also, we had one, TV. We didn't have TVs in our rooms. The TV was downstairs. And we had negotiations on Saturday morning. What do you want to watch? Dave, Mish, what do I want to watch? Versus now we go peel off and deal with our screen. So again, we're missing an opportunity to manage a very low stakes conflict. Additionally, resources. If there's an analog resource, there's one tennis court or there's one basketball, versus let's go and, I can go play online, my digital thing or my Wii. I'm not limited by scarcity. So it has removed some scarcity, but also we lost some of the ability to have to negotiate and talk to each other and deal with things. And so we also grew up with less comparison. The comparisons weren't readily available and constant. I didn't know immediately where all my friends were. I can pull up a thing and now look at Instagram where like, oh, you're here, you're there, you're this person, you're chatting about this. I didn't know if they were talking on the phone. Now I can see the conversation on, whatever they're working on, or Discord. So the comparison, there's much more comparison, and that can create some issues about self and identity and fear of missing out and so forth. And the stakes of making mistakes now seem to be higher. The mistakes legally of screwing up, there are more consequences. Being a dumb teenager now there are lawsuits when you're a dumb teenager. Now it's often not the parents, but there are lawyers involved, which I have friends who are involved with that. The documentation of mistakes, it can be forever now. Things you do, mistakes you do, a video of you doing a dumb thing. I used to have, some of my students I worked with 20 years ago, they were posting pictures of themselves taking a bong hit. And it was funny. They wanted, these young guys trying to show off. Like, that can live for a long time. Be very, very thoughtful what you post on the internet and what you share with your friends. And additionally, I've had students I've worked with die in college. And very, very upsetting to go to a funeral of a kid who's 19 years old. But with fentanyl, things that are in, I mentioned before, pot has gotten so much stronger. The likelihood of getting addicted or being harmed by it is much, much, much greater than the stuff that was going around in the 90s. It's just much more THC. Things are different. So we have stronger drugs, and making mistakes can be much more costly. So additionally, with SEL, there's a lot of knowledge and interest in this because during the pandemic, there was a real sense that our social and emotional learning was stunted. And in my experience, I look at my daughter, we kept her so tight because of COVID, we were nervous. And then at first she went to the playground and she saw kids and she ran the other way. And she's starting school in about 2 weeks. We're excited about that, and there'll be a chance to socialize. But it's amazing that she was really limited with her development because we didn't want her to get sick or my wife to get sick. And, Suze is having a baby in October. It's all about keeping everyone protected, but we missed opportunities. So what I saw was some limitations for a toddler. But I worked with students who had real troubles. I actually worked with a student whose friend, there were suicides. There's all this stuff that happened in the pandemic. And people were trying to live remotely. And I saw kids who were A students, B students began failing because suddenly all their interactions, all their cues socially were gone and they were behind a screen. It didn't work out so well, spending your day by day, behind a screen. So some kids are playing catch up now, including my kid and many others who are trying to get back things they missed, opportunities they missed. So, and there are many common scenarios. Here's a list, a couple of parents crafted, and some of these are familiar. When you got a bad grade, you got cut from a team. That's an emotional regulation moment. You didn't get the part in the play you tried out for. You weren't invited to a thing. I experienced that myself. I'm sure all of you out there did as well. There was a dance or a cotillion or a thing that we weren't invited to. You got dumped. Someone didn't like you back. There was bullying. Someone did a mean thing, or your kid said a bad thing, and they jumped into a fray online or in person. You had someone offered, your kid was found with a jewel or a vape, and there was a substance. These are all things that happen nonstop. And, kids are having to deal with these things and many, many other things. So some of them are similar, from our childhood, some of them are not. And one of the first things one of my colleagues shared with me, that no matter what, it's safety. In today's age, she is a psychologist. And with all the activities, all the socializing with your kids, talk safety. Keep them alive, keep them going through. Because again, things happen. Teaching kids how to be with their friends and take care of themselves. And one thing she recommends with all of her clients is how to deal with all of your kids. If you call me, if you need me, I promise I'm going to be there. I'm going to show up. No questions asked. I will honor that you made a decision for safety. I will always show up for you, and I'm not going to ask you why you need me, whatever happened. And so that's a nice thing that that kids can know there's a sense of safety and comfort with all this stuff they're dealing with and growing up and facing risks and dangers, that you are there to keep them in a healthy, good place. So I think that's a good slide. And have that pledge with your kids if you don't have it already. If you call me, I will show up and not ask any questions, period. I'll drop what I'm doing. I'll be there. I promise. That's a big deal. And it's important that you broaden the definition of success. I've worked with many parents, many families over the years, and some of them are hyper-focused on a certain way of defining success. I want my kid to have this outcome, these grades, go to this kind of school. And I look at this, I've seen kids go to college, drop out of college, take a gap year, come back to college, take 5 years off. This is this long process. Leave a prestigious school for a school with less prestige, all these changes, change majors, take 7 years to finish school. I've seen the whole thing. And part of it is looking at this long-term path, the long arc of development of a young person, and thinking about character and growth and development as primary, not just an outcome that you thought would be defining. Or this, if we can get here, this is a proxy for a good life. But there's so much more. Don't get too hung up on grades. I mean, we're a tutoring service, granted, but I've seen, there are times when the answer is back off, drop down the class, move away from the AP. It's coming at the expense of your kid's development. Don't always push. There is a balance in everything. And I've seen students, and so have you, they work for high GPA. It's all about this high performance, but then there are other issues, managing their emotions. Some of them are cutting, some of them are using self-harm or substance abuse. They're struggling socially. They're having other conflicts. So they have the grades, but they haven't really built the self. And Angela Duckworth had her moment was about 10 years ago, talking about grit. And she framed this as these kids are the fragile perfects. They may have, in this very narrow thing, found success in academics, but are they really ready for life? Are they really ready when the first big setback happens, or someone who is this big star, they focused on everything on becoming the soccer star, then they blow out their knee, and that career is over. And then who am I? Where am I? Have I built these other parts of myself and resilience and deep inner resources, versus I was just performing. I was performing, and myself is fairly fragile. So you want to have resilience and a robust human being who can handle setbacks, because they're going to come. You want to create a culture of warmth and trust with your kids. Right now, my primary work with students is as an executive function coach. I stopped teaching test prep a while back. And these days, my job is to be there and be a support and help these kids. And my thing is always coming at them without judgment. I meet you where you are, which is, kind of a proxy. It's always different for a parent. I get that. But trying to be at a place where they feel like they can tell me things. And I've been doing this for over 20 years. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to shame you, belittle you, and and part of it is shared vulnerability. You show me your wounds, I show you mine. You're having the struggle. Here's a struggle I had. Here's something I went through that was really hard for me. And the idea of being a guide on the side versus being a sage on the stage. Don't be, I'm with you on your level. I'm not way above you, which is, as parents, there is a different dynamic, but trying to be there to meet them where they are. And then you're observing and you're listening and trying to listen very deeply. And I'll talk more about listening in a few slides. So when you're working with your kids, if they're 13, if they're 16, your kids are going to make so many choices in their lives. And if they get better at making choices, it's going to help them with everything. So giving your kids, your teens, as many opportunities as they can to have choices. Little choices, things, in your life and your family, in the order of things. I did that with my students, even having them, if I'm working on 5 subjects, what do you want to do first? Where do you want, giving them little bits of agency and choices. One of my favorite theories of motivation, DC and Ryan out of Rochester and out of Maryland, they're huge academics. And their theory of motivation says there are 3 things that all humans need for self-determination, that we all have a need to be competent and to feel like we can, do things and achieve things. We all have a basic need for autonomy, choice. We don't want to be slaves or under someone's boot. And we all have a need to relate to others. We are social animals by nature. And if you attend to these 3 needs, humans tend to do better. And so honoring, your child has a need to be competent in certain areas, to have some autonomy, some freedom, some choice, and also to be connected. And if we give our kids that, that's a great, way to motivate them versus shame or fear or rewards or looking at these basic needs as the primary driver. So kids are going to have choices. And I tend to believe, I haven't had teenagers myself, I work with many who look very different, and their appearance is one of the ways they show off their individuality. That's the choice they're making. Their hobbies. I've had kids be into reading, into robotics, into scouting, into aviate, whatever they want. Their free time really is their free time. It's, it's free by nature. Their electives, giving them choices there they're going to be choosing soon when they're in college. Their activities beyond school, things they want to read, giving kids as much choice as you possibly can and having less control. And then also building empathy, teaching kids how to take perspective. That's something that's really interesting in terms of social and emotional learning. How do I work with people? And teenagers, by nature, they're going to be very self-centered, which is part of their development, and learning how to become, focused. How do I shift perspectives? And how do I walk a mile in that person's shoes? And part of it, when, you're going through a conflict, really encouraging them to think, how do you think that person felt? One frame, which I really like, one of my colleagues is a consultant, and he says, everyone is the hero of their own story. And that really sticks with me. When someone does something, I'm like, what a jerk, what are they doing? But it's like, wait, in their mind, they're doing the right thing. Like, they're the hero, they're serving some, and so it's like, it makes me, why do they, what they're doing? And it could be they stole, but they stole for their kids. I've had that happen, other things like, how are they the hero in the story? And I learned how to shift perspectives. And that's a really powerful question. If we're all the heroes, getting them to think differently versus thinking about their objects, oh, they're bad, they hurt me, they're bad. Like, what's driving them? What's motivating them? What are their values? And encouraging that kind of discourse. And it could be when you're watching a movie. It could be when you're looking at what's happening on the, January 6th thing. What's motivating them? Moving past this heuristic black and white thinking into more nuance. And that's really helpful for building relationships, understanding that what drives you, what you value, may not be what your friend values, thinking about different motivational profiles and things that we think are really important. This one issue voter, what's driving them? Why is that so important to them? So getting that kind of discourse with kids can be helpful. And then modeling problem solving is a huge piece. I think about this, that my dad, he was a medical doctor, and he always talked, when he came back from work, when we had dinner at the table, when we weren't doing sports or, the play or whatever it is, we talk about what happened at work. We talk about things he saw or noticed or conflicts, and he'd actually get our perspective, get our opinions. I really like that. I remember that. And we'd also talk about current events. And what do you think? We'd all go around the table and share. We'd communicate. We'd have a little conflict, very low stakes. I remember even reading, about how the Kennedys, with Jack Kennedy at his table, same thing. They talk about affairs and politics, and the kids could talk and share and get their opinions out. And so, what are the values? What's motivating people? And so that we could practice some problem solving in this little hypothetical scenario and talk about conflict in a very low stakes way. That was helpful for me growing up as a kid with my father doing some modeling there. And then role playing. I've done this before with students, if they're willing, you could role play a potentially hard scenario. I've helped kids get ready for interviews when they're, and so kind of doing some prepping, some role playing. But even, other things, if you're going to have a hard conversation, then try a few lead-ins and how does that land? My therapeutic training, like there's a technique called the empty chair, where you put a chair, actually move it over and have them go back and forth, taking on the two roles of how this might play out. If they have to deal with a hard thing or talking to a boss, and if they trust you with that, that's an interesting little, modeling. And then, your kids are going to have setbacks. I'm sure they've already had them. And your reaction as parents really matters when your kids are trying to figure out, what do I make of failures and setbacks? Is there going to be shame? Like, should I avoid failure? The whole growth versus fixed mindset piece. And, I work with kids, and sometimes they let themselves down. They let me down. They got an F on the exam that we talked about prepping for, and they didn't prep. And so part of it's asking questions, doing inquiry, what's going on? And, what could have gone differently? Tell me, what do you think happened? And so we're getting curious, and I'm not saying you were bad. How could you let me down? But it's just, all right, let's talk about this. You were tired, you misjudged, you spent too much time on this thing, you underprepared for that, you got tied up in social activity, or you were playing on the internet. Okay, let's talk about that. And it's not shameful because again, they're going to have 1,000 other choices in high school, then in college and beyond. But part of it is helping them understand themselves, how they think, how they work, the support and the environment they need versus me telling them you were bad, right? And same thing for parents. I think it's the same thing. And so because there are more setbacks coming, disappointments are going to be coming. They're going to have experiences of not getting the role they wanted to play. They're not going to become the peer leader. They're not going to win the vice presidency or get the yearbook editor position. They may not get into the program, the internship, the college they plan for. I've seen that a lot of the time. And part of it is, staying grounded, being supporting, loving, being real and authentic with them. And your love and support can keep your kids from going into the spiral of shame, which is often just right there when you're a teenager. The biggest thing when you're a teen is to not be embarrassed, not be humiliated. They want to be connected to others as their identity is being tied more to their peers and their friends, versus their family as they're shifting towards adulthood. They kind of keep them from feeling a deep sense of shame or being less than or less worthy. So our support, our love it means a lot to our kids. And even me as a coach, same thing. It's that rapport is everything. And part of it with social emotional learning is teaching. There's a concept called distress tolerance. And that was really brought to the front by Dr. Marsha Linehan. She is very renowned for her development of, initially it was for borderline personality clients, and she actually has borderline tendencies and herself, dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT. But now we're learning that DBT works for all kind of kids, all kind of cases. And it's distinct from CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. This is more of a specific modality of therapy. And so part of it, when you have, learning, how do I manage myself when I have distress, when I have setbacks? And I've seen kids go to hard play. I've seen one kid showed me his arm and he was putting out cigarettes on himself and burning his skin when, as a way of dealing with emotional challenges and setbacks. It's like, we need to find a better technique, because what you're doing, you're hurting yourself. It's destructive, but it's also purposeful. I'm numbing out. I'm using this pain to numb out that pain. But there's a cost to your physical body, to your other health. Let's find more adaptive ways of managing this. You don't like this level of stress and pain. We all know people who turn to a substance. They turn to ethanol, have a drink, or THC, and they turn to marijuana. I have friends, adults who do both, they're living their lives, but they're leaning too heavily on these chemical fixes versus finding other ways to manage stress and distress, and so forth. And so, because we're all going to have challenges. So this is learning about this stuff. And part of it, helping our kids reframe experiences to encourage more of a growth mindset and not be afraid of setbacks. Because again, if you want to live life, you're going to have setbacks. One of the primary tenets of cognitive behavioral therapy is reframing. That's an important notion that, something happens, but what I make it mean is that's infinitely malleable. I can make the same experience mean 1,000 things. And so there are many frames of this was a failure, I failed, I'm bad, versus, the world isn't a safe place, versus this is random, versus that person's bad, I'm good. Versus there's more nuance here. There are many ways of seeing the same event, and you can change the frame. So you get to assign the meaning. And that's part of it with teenager emotionality. Like your emotional response can vary, and it'll vary based on the meaning you assign. Like what's the story that I'm telling about this event? This thing happened. It was okay. I didn't get this. I didn't win the vice presidency for the 10th grade class. That's an objective event. I didn't get the votes. It went to Chris. Okay. Then the meaning I assign that's the infinite thing. It means no one likes me. Suddenly I go to this dichotomous place. I suck. I should never try that again. That really hurt. And then suddenly whatever I make that mean versus, what? Chris has X or Y or Z, or for 1,000, I didn't try hard enough. I only made 2 posters, not 10. I didn't really politic hard. If I really wanted, I could try again next year. But whatever we make it mean, that becomes our story and our narrative, and that can change behaviors in the future. So help kids reframe that meaning that we assign. Okay, whatever happened, but what you make it mean, that's the important thing. We can shift that, adjust that. That's most of what therapy is, changing what the meaning we assign events that happen in our lives. And we want to build resilience, social emotional learning. That really how we spring back, because again, we're going to have setbacks. We have them all the time. As adults, we deal with things with work, with relationships. There's physical health, ours, people we love. It's part of it. And if you want to foster, when a thing happens, am I knocked down for months, or can I recover? Can I use my network, my friends, my people? Can I journal? Can I take care of myself and get myself back faster after, life, a train hits you, which happens. And so with kids, if you want to build resilient adults, that's going to affect how you parent. And if, you have to be careful of when you swoop in, when you save, when you rescue, and when you allow them to face consequences. And, absent bodily harm, like in most cases, I want kids to experience some of the pain, the mistakes that they had to make, so they'll learn and not make bigger mistakes in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. If they're cheating now, I want them to be caught in high school versus in college, or in something else, or with the IRS for their taxes, whatever it is. There's a consequence now, but again, the mistakes can often loom larger as you get later in life. They're going to experience some frustration. They didn't turn this thing in. They're going to miss this internship. I'm not going to drive home, go and deliver it and save them, because I want them to have the pain of, oh yeah, if you don't turn things in on time, you miss things. Because then they can miss a bigger thing in college, where they don't sign up for the dorms. Now they have to get housing off campus, or they miss something. They can't go abroad. It's like, if they can learn in high school, I'd rather them learn now than learn in college. And so you can be supportive and, validate their feelings, hold space without solving or fixing or undoing their mistake. This is a challenging thing, because often we want to fix. I know I have it too with my kid. And the way we parent, we are really setting a model, a stage for the way they're going to be with other people in the future. The way we get upset with them or don't get upset with them, the way we show up, the way we care, the way we listen to them or don't listen to them. They're taking cues nonstop. And our teenagers, they have a job to make some distance from you. My friend Brian talks about his daughter Emily, and she's always like, "Dad, stop talking," which is amazing. This kid you've loved and held and nurtured, now she's like, "Dad, please shut up," in a kind way. And their role is to reject, and say, "No, I'm not you. I'm not enmeshed with you." And that's part of healthy development. But they're also absorbing all the time. They're listening all the time, much more than they'd ever have you believe. And these lessons may show up in 5 years, but they're absorbing through being near you. And so again, they need to individuate. That's a key aspect of this development, this phase of development. But they're learning all the time from you and where you are with them. Sometimes parents are like, "My kid didn't say anything. How can I relate?" It's fine. And so, how was your day may not be the right question, may not get you to where you want to be with your kid. And sometimes you have to ask more specific questions, showing that you know exactly what's going on with them. I have one advantage, like when I'm seeing students online, I actually write down everything from a prior conversation. So when I lead off the next one, or the key elements, I can tee off, so how did things go with this? How things go? And I know, and one thing I like to do, I learned from colleague Seth Perler, I like taking a temperature check. So I force them to respond, not how are things fine, but on a scale of 1 to 10, how did that presentation go? Not fine, like 7, 10 more. And I ask them to go a level deeper. How was rehearsal? That was a 3. Like, oh, okay, tell me more about it. I'm curious. And so it moves you past fine if getting a pat answer. Or you could ask them, what's the most challenging thing you're dealing with right now? I ask that all the time to my kids. What's the biggest challenge you're facing right now in school? And then also, or what's something that's really making you think or question something you thought you knew? So if you ask a different question, you can engage them in a different kind of discourse, which is fun for kids. Additionally, a big thing is increasing your own emotional vocabulary. We're talking about our kids' social emotional development, expression, and learning. We want them to be able to express themselves articulately and fully. And so, they need a broad vocabulary so parents can show off what they're going through, things they're experiencing, without unduly burdening, the kids. There's a whole thing of putting too much on the students. And I've seen this. I know about this, where one parent is offloading the other parent onto a kid. That's not healthy. That's when you're parentifying, and that's no good. But just sharing authentically what's going on with you, appropriately, teaching your kids how to be more expressive. But that's really powerful when your parents start to open up to you. And I'm sure you've experienced this. Some of you out there on this webinar, you have parents that they're older. When they began to get real with you about their lives, their fears, it changes things. And you can start that earlier. I am still a big brother. I was assigned a little brother when he was 13. He lost his father, and I would meet with him and hang out with him. as part of this PAL program. And now he's in his 30s. It's amazing. But still, I met him and it was so real. And I shared what, what's happening with me. And he was 13. I was at least 15 years older. But still, I could talk to, what's happening with my life, what's going on with work or other things, and they can relate. 13, they're still adult enough. And by me being real and authentic, it opened things up in our relationship. So modeling, you could be, talking to your 15-year-old, I'm scared about something, and say things you're scared about. This thing that happened with, Roe v. Wade in Georgia, I'm scared about that for X, Y, or I'm really feeling disconnected from my friend or XYZ, or I'm worried about this. Again, without putting too much on your kid, there's a balance point here. Or I'm really proud that I was able to finish my bliss, and you're showing your kids, okay, to be proud of something. I'm really hopeful about this, or I wonder if I did the right thing with my work group. And, you don't have to always be a pillar of strength. I think it's nice to model strength, but also model vulnerability, also model honesty. You're modeling real friendship. You're making a space for honesty, and your kid can step into that. So the more real you are with them, the more real they're going to be with you. And I've experienced that. Additionally, modeling how to get help, modeling that, teens who are going to ask for help are going to do better in high school and college beyond, and when in their first jobs. So for you, it's modeling. It's not being too proud to ask for help when you need it, and getting support. There's no shame in, people who get help do better in life. Make sure your kids understand that. They don't see you as this a paragon above all help. And then it's important that your kids see you modeling coping skills for social emotional learning. They're trying to manage themselves. How are you managing? And I remember I had to learn these skills after I left my family home, because the coping skills weren't as robust. There was a lot of yelling in my childhood home. And then my dad would get small and blow up or leave. It wasn't ideal. And I had to go and do some therapy and get some work and train myself and go to men's groups and learn how does a man show feeling and emotion. That was something I couldn't get from my dad, but so until later in life. But ultimately, you model for your kids. If I'm really frustrated or really stressed out, one of my friends hits walls, like, don't show your kids you're hitting a wall, hurting your hand. Or don't do that. Don't yell at the dog. Like, wait a minute, there's a better way. But saying, I need 5 minutes, and walking outside, you're showing your kid a skill about when you're really, really hot, you're in a fight, take 5 minutes. That's a great strategy for emotional regulation. Taking a walk, taking some deep breaths, saying, I need a break right now. Meditation, I'm a huge fan. If your kids see you doing this, that's huge points for you. Exercising, self-care, it's a big deal. Anything, they're going to pick up on the way you manage yourself. And as they learn, again, versus let me knock things down with substances, or let me do other things that are hurtful, or let me distract myself, through games or sex or whatever, versus no, let me take care of myself in this way, and have you show that. And, part of it, I mentioned the self-disclosure when possible, when appropriate, sharing your story with kids, especially going through when you had a hard time, because they're often going through hard times and you didn't have the answers. And if they see that you too went through challenges, that's a big deal. Learning, when my dad was starting out his career and he was struggling and he was working 5 jobs and moonlighting everywhere, it's like learning that, he didn't always have it figured out. Because often our kids see us when we have more figured out. We're later in our careers, versus I struggled in this career. My dad got C's and he got into 0 med schools until he was off the wait list. One school called him and someone dropped out the first day of classes, and learning, wow, my dad was this big powerhouse doctor, but he was a C student. And it's like, it didn't, he was able to still have this great life and career. So it helps you contextualize your own life, your own setbacks when someone's honest with you. And then modeling how to listen very deeply and profoundly. Again, helping them feel understood, and I'm modeling that, I don't like triangles, talking about someone. I like one direct. Let's talk directly, showing them this is important. And then there are many ways of how do you attend, reflecting back, you're watching, you're engaging, you're observing. This is part of therapeutic training, and looking for incongruence. If your kid says things are fine, but then their face does something like that, things are fine. I'm really excited. And it's like, wait a minute, something is off. So really to read the nonverbals, because most communication, about 2/3 of it is nonverbal, subsemantic. And then, so again, if their foot's twitching, if they're self-soothing, it's like, something's happening here emotionally. And I have some training with Hakomi therapy, and part of it is actually asking what's going on with that foot, or what's that foot saying, or when their body is speaking, because the body also talks. And you can track what's going on with someone's physical, body, if their eyes change or their eyes are rolling. So, listening deeply, but also to nonverbals. And if they are on a roll, there are times I'll just let people talk, and oftentimes they can solve their own problems if they can just get it out. They're versus trying to interrupt or stealing their story, is letting them get their story out. And then Linehan talks about this with validation. It's a big thing about validating empathy and communication. You're validating your kid's experience. So they're going to come to you. I understand your perspective, your world, and I get it. The way you see things makes sense. And even, kids are a little bit self-centered and they don't have our perspective. And so they're really banana shape about someone didn't ask them to prom, or that this thing happened, or this little, I've heard kids say things as silly as, where I get into college determines my life. And it's like, wow, you're young. And, at 17, 18, yeah, my life is this thing determines. Like, no, it doesn't. You're going to change jobs. You might go grad school, XYZ. It means so little in the grand scheme. It means a little, but again, validating where they're coming from, understanding their perspective. And I get it from where you stand. I understand that. You can also just do some corrections, but validating their feeling. Search for what, and if there are things that are invalid, we'll validate. I hear you feeling this, but you're feeling this because, well, I'm not sure this means that. And that's where you kind of do some slight corrections. Spitting in the soup. You say, validate as much as you can, but then if it's not valid, call it out. Say, there may be a different way to see that. Heinz Kohut, great thinker, researcher, talked about young people especially need to be, he called it a mirroring transference. You have to value them, validate them. They need to be seen, and be seen as special. Although, it's important for kids. They're forming their self. They need to shine a little bit, and we have to let our kids shine. And there's a degree of confidence, of pride, of showing off, of exhibition, which is healthy. That's part of mental health. And so letting your kids have that. Don't squash that. Honor that part of them, to be seen and accepted and validated for who they are and who they, in their mind, they might become. That's a beautiful thing. And then part of it is looking at, with these young people, moving eventually as we get older away from controlling, and less and less control, more about coaching, shifting the energy towards support and getting them ready to go and be adults versus, again, fixing, controlling, and so forth. And you're going to have to work hard not to fix it, because none of us want our kids to be distressed. It's the hardest thing, seeing your kids suffering. All of us, even if your kid's 2, if your kid's 50, you're gonna have a hard time watching your kids suffering. There's the maxim, you're only as happy as your unhappiest kid. And there's some truth. When one of your kids is really in a hard place, it affects you at all the levels. The challenge is teenagers can be unhappy a lot. A lot happens. There are many highs and lows, and the whole thing is, am I gonna be along for their ride? And earlier on, your role was to fix and help. But now it's to steward them and to encourage them and guide them, but not in the middle, letting them run. Ask the right questions versus here's the answer, because soon they're going to be on their own, and having them learn how to find the answers for themselves. You're going to be a resource, hopefully a phone call away, but they have to learn this process of how do I solve problems. And you want to create time for them for reflection. Whenever a thing happens with one of my students, I ask, what did you learn? What surprised you? What'd you get? How did it feel? Just asking these open questions, and then taking a minute for mindfulness. I do this with my little brother, who's now in his 30s. We still would go for walks when he was 13 and 14, and we just stop for a minute and look. We're taking a walk around Stone Mountain, we're at Kennesaw, we're by the Chattahoochee River. We just shut up for a minute and let's look at the scene, and taking that space, that pause, and don't fill it all in, and showing that making space is actually really important for our growth and for our relationships with ourselves. Quiet is okay. Also encouraging written expression for social emotional learning. Introspection is really powerful, and learning about what you're feeling, metacognition, learning about what's going on. What are you afraid of? What are you nervous about? What are you excited about? Who are you interested in? Writing these things down in a journal that's not for display, not for external consumption, but for you, is a powerful thing. It's fairly dated, but I still journal. My wife journals. There's value in that. And my mom was a journalist, and when we went on vacation, she made every kid write 1 page in their journal every day of our vacation. Didn't matter what you wrote, didn't matter if you were messing around, didn't matter if you're drawing, but you had about 15 minutes to write in your journal. And that's something all of us, my sister, she's a lawyer, my brother, teacher and a rabbi. We're all writers and thinkers. So the writing is really good, and it's a good practice. And then encouraging any contemplative experience. If your kid has any impulse at all towards the Eastern traditions, meditation, yoga, qigong, tai chi, anything that's slow and that's sitting in silence, moving your body in silence, is amazing for inhibition, for self-management, self-control, self-awareness. And then everyone needs to have something that gives them the message that they are important, and that was kind of Kohut's message, they have to shine. So part of it is creating the structures for them to have these experiences. Talk to your kid, work with your kid, where's there a place they can be in a supervised setting with other adolescents. Again, for social learning, sports teams, scouting, volunteering, not about skill or popularity, but where can they learn a little bit of leadership or relational skills? Where can they fit in somewhere, belong to a place, and have a sense that the world needs them, that they have value, purpose, and meaning, helping to craft that for your kid. And if there's a chance for them to get a job somewhere or volunteer somewhere, have some responsibility, they'll have, and there's a huge thing of earning some money for yourself, learning that, and also when you're working, when you're volunteering, you're learning about relationships with others and power dynamics and hierarchies and conflicts and scarce resources. How do I manage this? I need help with this. So these things beyond school are also really powerful if you can encourage them and create them. And in terms of helping others, being tied to others, this is Albert Ellis. I'm sorry, this is Alfred Adler. Social interest is really key. That, belonging, connecting, giving back. These are huge, huge things. And the more we're tied to others, the healthier we are. And so if someone's really in a funk, if someone's getting, make sure they find a way to give back. And I know a friend of mine gets depressed, has a little bipolar depression. When that person starts to really isolate, part of it is, are you giving back? Are you connecting with others enough? Versus are you swimming in self? And teenagers often are swimming in self, and often people who are depressed get really into self. And you need to reach out and be tied to others. You can get lost in yourself. There's some despair when you get totally self, all you see is yourself. And encouraging involvement, advocating for getting involved in service, and also having a diversity of people you interact with, learning how to deal with people of your socioeconomic status and class, but also others, because the world is big and you're going to have other interactions in your life. And so more involvement is better. Then the dinner table. I mentioned with my experience with my dad and our family, really, really key for growth. And it's fine to insist your kids eat a dinner with the family when they're not in activities. And it may be your single best shot to know what's happening with your kid if they sit with you and talk, at the dinner table. Beyond the dinner table, getting your kid one-on-one. Once a month, try to do an activity with each one of your kids. Just you and them. If you can do it for an hour, 2 hours, and because different things happen when you're with the parent. Only, one kid, one parent, than with both, or with the other kids in the car. It doesn't much matter what it is. It's going to and from the activity and going and getting for ice cream. That's when a bond really forms. So making room for that, even when they're teenagers, if they're willing. I know they have their own demands and friends, but even, an hour, just me and you going to do a thing, just us two. And then having activities, fun things for your kids, even when they get older, trying to think about activities. And then one thing that may happen, your kids are really into their peers, but suddenly there may be a swing back, and your kid, your daughter, your son may want to spend a little more time with you than normal and not with their peers as much. And that may be a cue that they need to, to be near you again, to spend time with you the way they used to, that they don't right now feel good socializing. Something may have happened. There may be too much happening, sex or drugs or alcohol. They may want to go back to you for a minute. And then go with them, go to a movie, go hiking, go bowling, spend time with them. And then don't be nervous that, they're missing out if they, some of you may relish this time, but it's okay too when they come back to you. And then finally, a few slides. I gave a talk last week about this. I'm going to go through a few pieces. Technology is a big deal for social emotional learning, because many of us are spending too much time and we're shifting conflicts from, in person. I remember when I was dating before I was married, having to break up with people was hard. And then I remember when this is all before the cell phones, and then suddenly people began to break up by text, we're done, or X, Y, or then people began to just ghost and totally ignore the conflict. I'd rather not even deal with it, which is so sad when that's the answer. It's emotionally, to me, it's cruel, but it's kind of callous. But there's a thing that we're getting worse at conflict because we have less experience with it. And part of it is we're spending less time together in person. Today's teens are spending less time at parties than any prior generation. They're spending less time going out with their friends. It's been cut in half in 15 years. People who, get with their friends every day. So we're losing some interactions. And also, like even college kids, today we're spending 4 fewer hours a week socializing and 3 fewer hours a week going to parties. So we're doing 7 hours less of in-person socialization. And so those chances to build social skills, to negotiate relationships, conflicts, we're just less experienced. That 10,000 hour rule is taking us longer to get the same place, because whatever you're getting via text is a fraction of what you're getting when you're looking at a person. You're giving us all the mammal signals and the verbal cues, nonverbal cues. So we're less good at reading each other because of these devices. It's, Snapchat isn't as good. It's just not. And so technology, when you're dealing with older adolescents, engage them in conversations, how they feel after spending too much time on social media, what are they putting off? Do they feel better or worse? And having them make those connections themselves versus you telling them or controlling them. And make sure that the phones aren't squeezing out exercise, sleep, friendships, and things like that. Also, bullying power is often expressed via phones. Every one of us will dabble with hierarchy and power because we come from chimpanzees as much as the bonobos. Hierarchy and aggression is part of our DNA, the common ancestor more than from chimps and bonobos. And ultimately, we're all going to experience being a bully, being mean, and then having people being mean to us. Talk to your kids about the right use of power, compassion, courage, communications, because our phones can get out of hand. And, it's much easier now. People are saying things they would never say in person with our devices. We're losing some of that, the mammal stuff, hiding behind the veil of, anonymity and so forth. And then also, I mentioned briefly the comparison culture, that the sense of I'm trying to cultivate a brand. Here's the brand of Chris, and I look like this, I smile like this, everything looks great, and it's BS. It's not authentic. It's a curated performance, and that really steals from the the authentic expression of ourselves, the honorable, the felt experience of our lives versus this nonsense we're trying to put out there. My life looks so good, and the FOMO is teaching kids that it's just so much nonsense out there. Finally, I'm going to throw in a clip for summer camp. I was very involved at summer camp. I spent a total of 16 summers. I had to leave at 25 because I was the old man. It's like, I have to leave. But I saw my kids. I was a unit head for several years. I was a camp counselor for 5 years. And I was there forever. But so many kids grow at camp because their parents aren't there and there are no devices. They're not looking at phones. They're interacting with each other. There's the mean kid in the cabin, or the jerk, or the kid who smells, or the person who's not nice to you, or the friends in the other cabin. How do I interact with them? And you deal with conflicts, you deal with relationships, there's so much social learning and emotional. I'm by myself. I go off in nature for a time, or I want to be with my friends. I've had parents tell me, I get the letters back. My kid came back a different person after a month out there. And so rather than give kids the option of camp or no camp, give them the option of which camp do you want to go to. I think there's a lot to be gained by that. Additionally, beyond that, make sure there's ample room for play. Low stakes conflict when you're playing, when you're having games, dealing with things or fighting in a very easy, how to win and lose gracefully, how to use humor and laughter to diffuse tension. You can experience different parts of yourself when you're playing. A few resources: Dr. Ross Green, Brighton Quirky is really good. Tamar Chansky, fabulous. Parenting, Grown and Flown, they're very helpful. And there's a group, the Atlanta Psychology Group. They have good resources. Again, we'll share the deck with you. That'll be there if you want to look at it later. A few books I like. Wendy Mogul, I think, is amazing. I read that book about 20 years ago. I thought it was amazing then. The Blessing of Skin Knee, about letting your kids have their small setbacks. John Lee wrote a book, Growing Yourself Back Up. It's about when you're in a regress place, how to get yourself back to being an adult, how to recover yourself once you're feeling hurt. Ross Green, Raising Human Beings, and this dynamic partnership with the kids. And then we have one of Raising Resilient Children, Brooks and Goldstein. All right, so there's good content there. Then Applerouth, a few final slides. We try to meet the art of human connection and the science of learning. That's our sweet spot as a company. Things that we do, we coach kids in executive functioning, we help kids with testing, and we help kids with academics. These are things that we do. We have one more part of the series coming up. I did Teens in Tech last week. This is Teens in Social Development. And then in a few weeks, I'll be doing the Teens in Anxiety. And then we also have a really great workshop for teaching kids writing skills. Schools around the bend, and being a good writer can help you, in middle school and high school and college. Those of you who want to become better writers, we are offering classes now. And that is it. So let's open up and take some questions. Do you think it's okay to watch this session with our 13 and 15-year-olds once you have the recording out? I do think so. I think nothing in this is going to really be off-putting, or too speaking down. I mean, my thing is always to really respect kids. And I've always come from that place. I think part of it, when I was a young person, there are times I felt disrespected, and some of us have that same feeling by, like, I was a smart little tyke. And, but some of the authority figures in my life that didn't give me the respect I felt I deserved. And so one of my rules of thumb is always respect young people, and they come at them from a loving place. And they're pretty much, even when they're little adults in there, and that, treat them with integrity, and treat them with, to not disrespect them. So I think it will be okay. And if they get really bored, or okay, then you can respond to it. But I say, why not? I think it wouldn't hurt. All right. What else? Other questions? Anything from social emotional learning with your kids? Leslie, so admiring of all that you do and share. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I don't know, there's a tender place in my heart for young people. I think there is, getting my late 40s, but there's still a kid in me. And when I was a kid, there was an old man in me. It's kind of this interesting thing. The Senex and the Pooh are the Jung's construct, and we all have these parts of ourselves. And I think it's important we treat kids with a lot of respect, and help them on their way to become good adults. And we can model a lot for them. They look to us. Any other questions? Any other, before we call it a night? Oh, thank you. Okay, good. All right, here we go. Peggy, my child has social anxiety post-COVID. I totally get it. And post-bullying several years ago. Her brother and I are very social. I try to gently nudge her to classes, camps, events. But do you have other recommendations? So the gentle nudge, I mean, there are times, if you're amenable to it, I'm very pro therapy. I've gone to therapy myself. I believe in it, and I've seen it do a lot of good work for people, if that's something that's a possibility. As parents, part of it, yeah, in terms of modeling, you try to be inclusive. You bring her to things, get her out, try to think of activities that she might enjoy. Again, the gentle nudge is key. You don't force, you don't throw them in the pool if they don't want to swim. But it's modeling, it's talking, and getting, having her observe and look and learn, and seeing her friends doing things when they're, getting past anxiety. But there are definitely techniques. But, I think there are times to talk to someone and have her, get into a place where it's safe to communicate and express, and see if there are things underlying the anxiety, versus just go get out there. Really getting a sense of the root causes of some of it. And are there any underlying fears that are really guiding her, or limiting her, or inhibiting her? And so if you can get towards a deeper discussion, there may be a way she opens up more. So some of the insight might fuel some change in behavior. Again, it's, CBT is your cognitions, your behavior, your emotions, and they're all connected. You can either push behavior, or you can push the emotions, or push the cognitions. But the more they understand what the fear is about. I mean, you could have her do some journaling and writing about her anxieties, but there are many ways. But also, I would consider doing some therapeutic intervention if she's open to that, and you're open to that. How do you make a 15-year-old understand the importance of outdoor activities? Part of it is getting them, ideally you start early. I try to haul my kid around in my backpack on the trails at 2 and 3 will do camping. But the next thing is, and I, began going with I was assigned a kid at 13, and my safe place is always outside. I love the outdoors. I was at camp forever. And so it's doing low stakes outdoors, and maybe you start with a little hike. You don't go full on, go camping for the weekend. And maybe choose a place where there's some combined activity. There's going to be something outside, the thing that he or she likes. And so it's important. And then, making space. And it may be you start with, a very light, you spend a couple hours, then you spend like glamping, then you try camping, or you just do a hike. Or you could do it somewhere really fun and exotic. I have people, you go on a trip and they're in a cool place, and let's go to the woods in this cool new place. Or it could be something as mundane as, Stone Mountain, which I go to twice a week. But I think taking some time to reflect, talking about your experiences, And sometimes that's not so good in the heat of the summer. It could be a person likes doing an activity. It could be like frisbee. Let's do a disc golf thing, or just some way to tie in an activity they already like with the outdoors, and then try to go from there. Or just take them to a place that's sort of inspiring to you. Sometimes they don't get the outdoors till they go out west, and you make a trip out there. It's something they're blown away by the awe and the wonder of, oh my God, the grandeur of it all. And so that, if the mundane doesn't hit it, you might go big. So there are different ways, either a big trip or just talking about your experience, or kind of combining things they like already with things they haven't tried. All right, my first one is 20 lately, and it's been very hard to communicate with her. She loves to be in her room and spend most of her time on her cell phone. I try as much as I can to engage her into family activities, but sometimes it's hard. And when they're 20, I mean, it's hard to you can't really tamp down on screen time. It's more discourse and dialogue and getting her places and sharing, trying to find things she likes to do, letting her be more, kind of co-create, co-collaborate. But you can't, it's more discussion, but for sure. And also modeling. One of the huge things with devices is when you're with her, or even if you're driving, when the call comes in, tell her, I'd rather talk to you, honey. It's like, I'm not going to pick up the phone up because you're more important to me than this phone. And kind of doing some modeling about, these kind of things. So you guys modeling, making sure you're really giving her your attention, talking to her, getting outside, going for a walk, whenever you can get outside is always good. And so let's leave our phones in the car, let's chart, all these kind of things. But I know it can be hard, and but these are starting points. Electronics addiction is very hard to manage with teens, but especially when they're already adults and don't like to set limits right. When they're already adults, it's pretty hard. And again, you can still talk to them. You can still model yourself. And even if you had a tendency to always look at your phone, you can say to them, you know what, going forward, when I'm with you, I want to really be with you. And I want to put my phone away, and I want to turn it off. We're going to have dinner. You know what? You show them I'm turning this off now. And I really want to be with you, and you're important to me. And so even if historically you didn't do that, you can change things and signal to them, this is a new leaf we're turning over. We're trying something different. And talking to them, and you can say how it makes you feel if they're on the phone versus being with you. But I know these things are so damn addictive, and they're designed to recruit their attention and grasp them with all the dopamine and all the hits. It's hard. And you can ask them, like, you can't control them, but on this vacation, can we all agree that for part of it, and agree to the ground rules, we're going to have Saturday afternoon without devices. Is everyone okay with that? And you come up with a plan together. It's it's very different when the kids are 10 and you control the devices. It's your device. But in this case, you have to just appeal to their sense of, you love them, they love you, and you're going to model for them the behaviors you want to create in them, and be very explicit why I'm doing this, because I want to spend time with you, and I care about you, and whatever's happening here is not more important than you to me right now. Okay. All right, y'all. I think that's our talk. 9:03. Everybody have a great night. Really enjoyed it, and look forward to the next one later in August. All right. Have a good night.